everyone. Welcome to episode 31.
We are going to be covering number 28 of the Her Interactive PC games, Ghost of Thornton Hall.
Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
We sure hope so, and we hope you are too.
Join us as we talk Nancy Drew cover to cover and click to click.
Welcome to Regular Nancy Drew.
So much to talk about.
There is, yes.
But so this game was released on May 14th in 2013, which is very odd.
Yeah, usually the spookier game, I feel like they would do like a danger, exciting game in the spring and then the spookier, scarier game in the fall. But clearly I don't remember that correctly. That's all right.
Yeah, I would have sworn that this was a Halloween game, a Halloween release game.
It would make sense given that it's the scariest Nancy Drew game.
I mean, it's just absolutely not debatable. It is just absolutely 100% the scariest Nancy Drew game. So I'm very excited to cover it for that reason. I am also very excited to cover it because it is very controversial. So we'll talk about that too.
Yes.
But so apparently, Corey, this was based on the Nancy Drew Girl Detective number 10, Uncivil Acts.
Okay.
And I just have to say that based on the briefest of research that I have done about that book focuses on a Civil War reenactment that takes place in River Heights.
That's very different from the game. I mean, relatively. The Civil War theme is there for sure, but not the reenactment.
I mean, we'll definitely have to talk about this in context when we start talking about the contentious parts of this game, because, like, I think when you just consider that, it makes the result of this game even more egregious. Just thinking about the fact that this is literally the inspiration for this game was literally about a Civil War reenactment. But number 2, I also just have to say, I'm sorry, why is there a Civil War reenactment in River Heights? That brings into the whole location question of River Heights again. Because I think where we landed was Ohio, right? Or Illinois? Illinois.
Somewhere in the
Midwest.
The Midwest. I would say Illinois probably, just because
right. Chicago,
and how often that's mentioned. But yeah, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what Civil War battle was happening in Illinois? Maybe I'm just ignorant. Maybe there was one, but it doesn't seem far enough south to me, but I don't know.
I just looked, actually, and it looks like I have that one.
So
whenever we cover the Girl Detective series in the future,
gotta make a note.
Maybe we'll have to touch on that one.
For sure. Okay, so 3 words, Corey. Plantation. Yes. Haunted, right? Like the most haunted.
Yes.
And then, just like gross family, or like what's a better word than gross?
There's got to be something more succinct than,
I just have such complicated feelings about it. So I guess we could just say complicated. It's complicated.
Yeah. And that doesn't even touch on the missing person side of the mystery, which is what we're there to solve.
But really, that's honestly...
Although I guess it ties into the gross family.
And I will say that, like, the missing persons aspect is, like, the least relevant. It's just kind of like, that's the, the premise, but, like, really, does it matter? Nah. So...
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then. I think we should just get into it, because I really want to talk about this, and I have so much to say, and so much of what I have to say depends on the plot, and nothing that I can really summarize right out the gate. Just stuff that I feel like we just have to get into the nitty-gritty of. Okay.
Yes. Should we put a content warning on this one? Like, I feel like we're going to really get into nitty-gritty here in a bit.
We probably should. I'm not sure for what, though, yet, but probably...
Civil War,
racism,
slavery, racism,
incest.
All of the above. It is very incest,
I mean, like...
some very, very dark subject. Like, it's not just the scariest game. I would argue it's one of the darkest games as well. Like, we have some really, really upsetting themes in this. So just get prepared for that.
I'd say, like, traumatic death also. Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I hope you're excited for this. Because that was quite an introduction.
Well, I feel like it's so negative
so far as well.
well.
Okay, well, no, I will. Okay, I'm gonna start out and say I really, really enjoy playing this game.
You've said it's like one of your like top 5 favorites before, right?
It is. I think it is a really, really excellent game. I think it's 100% problematic, and I think there could have been a lot more that they should have done. But, like, when you play it, I don't think that you can hold it up against the rest of the Nancy Drew games and say that it is not one of their best games.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's my overarching summary of how I feel about it.
Well, that sounds good. Well, we have an excellent start here. Do you want to start us off?
Sure, yes. So typically when we start in this kind of realm of the games, we start off at a center of operations. But now, instead of starting off at the center of operations, we're waking up in the middle of the night. Nancy is awoken by a phone call. She's all groggy and she wakes up and she answers it. And it's Savannah Woodham. We know Savannah from number 23, Shadow at the Water's Edge, which we haven't covered in regular Nancy Drew yet, but she has been a character in the PC games prior to this. So she calls us because she has a case for us. Apparently a girl a little bit older than Nancy has been kidnapped. Nancy asked if the police should be taking care of this, and I was just like, ah! Finally, somebody said it. Nancy said it. But Savannah said there's only so much the police can do. The call had actually come in for Savannah. Savannah was asked to investigate this, but she can't go because she says Thornton Hall is a dangerous place for her because of her work as a ghost hunter, because Savannah is a ghost hunter. She says that Jesslyn, who's the missing girl, needs someone who isn't afraid to go after her. Oh, and Savannah is afraid. Can we talk about how uber frightening it is to hear about a professional ghost hunter being too scared to go somewhere because it's so haunted? Like, isn't this your job?
To be fair.
Isn't this your job?
I think Savannah's not great at her job. We'll have to talk about her later. But this was a theme in number 23 as well. It's just, I got too spooked and I had to leave. And why are you in this line of work if you don't like it? I don't really understand. But
anyway,
it can't.
Yeah.
I can't imagine it pays super well unless you're really good at it. So what's the point? Yeah. She had enough to like hire an assistant. Like surely she's getting this work. So I don't know. Seems like she does some like historical investigations as well.
That's true too. She's also like an author, so maybe like she does more in her work in that context. But anyway. So Nancy's like, yeah, of course, sure, I'll go. I would love to. And Savannah tells her to drive to the airport where there will be a ticket waiting for her to get on a plane. And I just have to say that it's in these kinds of moments where I am so freaking jealous of Nancy Drew, and that like I want someone to call me, wake me up in the middle of the night, be like, there's this super haunted place and you have to go right now. I paid for your plane ticket. Go to the airport. Can you imagine what that would feel like, Corey? Oh, the excitement, the adrenaline.
Yeah. And also not having responsibilities that you're like, oh, I can't because I have work tomorrow. Like, I would love that.
To be an 18-year-old unemployed detective.
Right. Drop of a hat. Let's go to Georgia.
Oh,
okay.
My gosh. Oh. Anyway. So, we're dropped off on Black Rock Island by a ferryman. He doesn't get a name. His name is just Ferryman, which I just have Ferryman. Let me make sure I'm enunciating that. Ferry is in Ferry, as in, like, the boat.
Yes.
And that is super on the nose. I just think that that's hilarious, right? Like a ferryman who is taking us to Black Rock Island. It's very evocative of, like, you know, death the river Styx, right? A ferryman.
It's not the only ferryman that we have in the games, and the next one it is going to be, the River Styx. So.
Exactly. He asks us, are we sure we want to come here? And he tells us to watch ourselves around the Thorntons because they've earned their bad reputation. He specifically warns us of Wade and a quote-unquote loony bin reject, which that's something we got to talk about later too, named Harper. He also tells us, of course, to especially watch out for Charlotte because the island belongs to her now and has ever since the fire took her. So it's haunted. It's haunted AF. Are we getting the haunted vibes yet? Very, very haunted.
Very haunted. But now we can kind of walk around the island. There is a large stone wall surrounding the grounds of this property and big iron gates. And okay, so if you guys have not heard of Oak Alley Plantation, stop right now, Google a picture of that. This setting is based off of that plantation. It's a real plantation in Louisiana. If you look at a picture, you'll be like, yes, that is Thornton Hall. So it's basically a really, really long driveway leading up to this massive white mansion with the 2-story porch with the big columns on the front of it. And then, do you know what kind of tree that is?
But I think it's because they're leafless, right? They don't have leaves on them at this particular point.
I think there's leaves on the ground, so maybe it's just fall, which is weird if this is a game set in May, but whatever. So there's big, massive, I guess since it's Oak Alley, they might just be oak trees, but massive.
But I would
trees.
also imagine they could be willow trees or something to that effect, something that kind of creeps over, but I don't know.
But basically massive trees lining the sides of this very long, walkway, driveway place that just all the way up to the house itself, and then if you turn right, there's another little gate there, and that leads to the Thornton family cemetery. So pretty big property here. We can walk around. So now we have 2 goals. We're going to explore the island a little bit more, find our way around, and of course find Jessalyn, our missing girl. The game takes place over the course of 3 nights, but it's always in the evening. We never see Thornton Hall in the daytime. It's just Nancy just wakes up after. At some points in the game, she'll stop and be like, "Oh, I'm so tired. I'm feeling kind of woozy. I should just go to bed at this point." And then we just get a cut scene where she's on the phone with Ned and Bess, and she's telling them about the events of that day, where basically they're just walking around looking for Jessalyn during the day, and then in the evening she's doing her investigating.
Yeah. So if we walk straight up to the house, we meet Colton, who is Jessalyn's fiance. He gives us Jessalyn's cell phone that he found in the house, but it's dead. And the charger that he gives us has been chewed up by something. Mm-hmm. So after finding some of the right items, we are going to be able to jerry-rig a charger and get it started charging. But not yet. But we ask about him and Jessalyn getting married soon and if her disappearance could be pre-wedding jitters. He does say that she might have had second thoughts about the wedding because everyone in the family apparently has second thoughts about the wedding.
That's red flag.
That is a big major red flag, but okay, we don't know what that means. But he does say that even if she did have second thoughts, she wouldn't disappear like this because she wouldn't want other people to worry about her. We do ask if he has had second thoughts, but he doesn't really give us a straight answer about that. It's very interesting. Later, we can ask more about his and Jessalyn's relationship, and basically we learn that they were childhood best friends, but only started dating about a year ago when Jessalyn's mother, Clara, apparently just told them to because, quote-unquote, everyone knows you're going to get married, so do it already.
Yeah.
This is super odd. Super, super weird. He also does tell us that Jessalyn kept trying to tell him something about Clara, but she could, never get it out. She would get close to saying it, but then she would just stop and change the subject. Very strange also.
Very interesting.
So it's at this point, after talking to Colton. I almost forget his name because I feel like he literally does not matter. After
No, he doesn't.
speaking to Colton, we can move into the house. And I just have to say that there are so many spooky things that happen in this game that it's like trying to even just like chronicle them is a challenge. So just to kind of give you general vibes as to what to expect, here are several spooky things that do happen in the game. The porch swing moves by itself. There is frequently a shadow that moves behind the window on just the side of the front door. So, like, when you face it, you'll see it. I see it, like, every single time. There's a shadow that passes by, like, that back door inside. In the foyer, when you're facing the fireplace, we can watch as, like, help me is being scratched out. Like, we're watching it happen. It's not just help me written on the fireplace. We see help me being scratched out by an invisible hand. Ah!
Right.
There's eerie singing. The statues in the graveyard move on their own, which is something we have to talk about later as well.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, of course, we will eventually see the ghost of Charlotte. So...
And I think that all these happenings are part of what makes it the scariest Nancy Drew game. And some of these things, like, they're going to happen whenever you click on them. Like the porch swing, first time you click on it, it's going to swing. You can kind of expect that. And with some, like, of the past games, it's a little less random than this game is with its spooks. Like with Castle Malloy, for example. Like, we know, like, the time that we go into Fiona's room to solve one of the puzzles, like, we're going to see the crow, we're going to hear the screeching, and then we're going to see the banshee, right? It's not exactly like that with this game. Like, the triggers are kind of random. You eventually, like with Castle Malloy, eventually you've played it enough times, you start to expect, like, when these are going to happen. Not the case with this game. It still spooks me out no matter how many times I've played
sometimes it'll happen, sometimes it won't happen, and whenever it does, it's always, always, always a jump scare. Like, it's always like,
oh yeah,
a moment.
There's some times where you're like, oh, nothing's gonna happen right now. I just got spooked like 3 times in the last 20 minutes, and then it's like the worst one yet.
Oh, I also just have to say that this isn't technically a jump scare, but freaks me out every freaking time I see it, and I don't know why. It's when you're in that back room, the creepiest room, which we'll have to talk about as well, where all the things are hanging from the ceiling, and you just turn, and I never expect it, but the like whatever sheet or cloth that's hanging there is just moving, and it's probably just moving because it's an old drafty house. Oh, yeah. But like, I'm like, oh my god.
Right.
It's that. So it's not only that there's just like these spooky shadows and creepy moving statues and stuff, it's also just like the vibe of this house makes you freak out at every small minor movement.
Oh yeah. Well, and nowhere feels like quote unquote safe.
Wow.
I would say Shadow at the Water's Edge, which is actually the game that we know Savannah Woodham from.
Scary.
It's probably the second scariest game, I would say, but we still have some spaces that feel safe. Like, just places that you could go where you know you're
the
not going to get a
convention center.
Like the bento stand, the convention center, the pachinko parlor. Here, absolutely nowhere is safe. Literally anywhere you could get a jump scare.
I have thoughts about this, but we should talk about it later.
Okay. Even like Nancy's like home base, her little sleeping bag, we get spooked there.
Oh
like
my
3 or 4
god,
times,
so many times. That's almost like prime spook space is where Nancy's sleeping.
If the graveyard is the least scary place in the game, you know it's a scary game. But I digress.
Yeah. Anyway.
Was that what you were going to say is the least
it's definitely one of them, but no.
Graveyard?
No, that's not what I was going to say.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, we will get there. Okay.
You want to take it?
Sure. Okay, so once we get inside the house, this place is pretty run down. It's pretty, like, immediately clear to us that no one has lived in this house for a long time. Holes in the floor, holes in the walls, holes in the ceiling. You can see daylight coming through the ceilings. There is, like, furniture and rugs and art hanging on the walls, but it's all looking very dilapidated and just kind of gross with cobwebs on everything and just, like, rubble piled up in the fireplace. So right when we walk into the front door of the house, and we'll have to talk about the layout of this house a little bit later as well, because it makes absolutely no sense, because from the outside it looks symmetrical, and then you're inside and it's definitely not symmetrical. But whatever. So we walk
It's
in,
Corey's
there's a large...
pet peeve. It's the biggest pet peeve of both games. The layout makes no sense!
It doesn't make sense! Well, and then, like, that back room where that big sheet is hanging, we can see out exterior windows, and there shouldn't be exterior windows, because there should be more house there.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not. We can't see the back of the house. It could just be, like...
True.
Like one room wide in the front, and then in the back it's just that little room.
But there's no way to access to the left of the staircase except for that room back there, you know, which is weird. Yeah. But anyway, so there's a large staircase right in front of us as we walk into the room, and then to the right there's a big double doors that leads into, like, I assume, living room area, and then if you go behind the staircase to the left, there is that room you were talking about that's kind of, I don't know, utility room, industrial.
We might as well just call it the scariest room in Thornton Hall, because that's what it is. It's the scariest room in Thornton Hall. And if you've ever played it, you know what the room is. So it's that room. It's that room.
Yeah. The stuff with the stuff hanging down from the ceiling, and Mr. Skin Bag that's running around, and yeah. We'll get to Mr. Skin Bags later, but so first thing we do is we turn to the right. In that front room that I guess we'll call it the living room, we find Clara Thornton, who is Jesselyn's mother. We ask her about Jesselyn's disappearance. She tells us that she came here with her friend Addison as sort of like a bachelorette party before the wedding. They just came here because they really like to spook themselves, or at least Jesselyn does. We find out later Addison does not like the spooks as much, but she went along for her friend because they just wanted to have fun, right? So Clara tells us, you know, you should try talking to Addison. Here's her phone number. See what kind of information you can get from her about when she last saw Jesselyn, right? She thinks that what happened to Jesselyn basically is that she was kidnapped for a ransom. She tells us that you wouldn't know it by looking at the state of this house, but we're a very wealthy family, and I'm just shocked that no ransom note has shown up yet. We'll talk about the family's wealth later. We will get there, I promise. She tells us that she feels like someone is trying to punish the Thornton family. So she says, greed and tragedy has made this place crumble, and whoever took Jessie wanted the family to sit here in this broken down old house to wait. We do ask her about the cold feet before the wedding theory, and she says that Jesselyn absolutely would not do this to her family. She loves them too much to cause them to worry about her in this way, so she really doesn't want to entertain that as an option. She says Jesselyn and Colton have definitely had their ups and downs as a couple, but they've worked through their issues. Colton has especially had some issues on his end, especially with his family, but they've worked through them. She won't really elaborate on it any more than that, but whatever. Nancy asked her why the family isn't out there looking for Jesselyn, and Clara says that they have actually closed their company down for the day, and the entire staff is out combing the woods looking for Jesselyn. And the police said, the family should stay put in the house because they're more likely to notice, one, if she comes back, or in case something is off, they would be more likely to notice in the house.
I'm sorry. I immediately have to talk about this. Your daughter is missing. And you're not out looking for her? You're standing in this broken down living room, staring out the window, twitching every time this fly buzzes around your head. You're not on the phone. You're not trying to coordinate. You're just standing there. And also, and at first I thought, this lady has paid her staff to just to go search for her daughter for her. Like, I can't even describe to you how much this incensed me, but like she does actually say that she's paying her staff regardless of whether or not they have volunteered for the search. Like, they either get the day off or they can go search for Jesselyn, but she's apparently not doing that. But
I feel like she mentioned that just to like make a point about how much everyone loves Jesselyn, that she's so beloved that everyone in the whole company would rather spend their day looking for her, which is fine, but again, doesn't explain why Clara is also not out there helping and looking for her daughter. We also don't know how long she's been missing
Right.
at the point
That's
that Nancy
true, too.
arrives. So maybe she was out there earlier and she just came back to the house to check again. But you're right, we see her just in this window the entire duration.
I mean, my explanation is that she's just this awful, unfeeling hag, but, you know.
Oh, she's a terrible mother, that's for sure. Terrible family member in general.
Nobody
She's
likes
awful
her.
to all of them.
Not a one, not a single one, but we'll talk about that later too.
Yes.
So, upon further exploration of this front living room, we find a couple of books. There's other stuff in the front room. There's a bunch of paintings and stuff, but the most notable things that we can look through here are these two books. There's one book on female spies in the Civil War, and this is notable, and because we learned throughout the course of this game, through reading this book, but also just from like other characters telling us stuff, that the Thorntons apparently got their start because their ancestor was a spy during the Civil War and was gifted this land for services rendered. I have so many questions about this. This makes no sense to me. You're telling me that this house or this land didn't exist pre-Civil War?
It did. It was a plantation previously.
Okay. But was she a spy for the North or the South?
She lived in the South and was feeding information to the North.
But then how did the North gift her this land?
During Reconstruction, the North took land from plantation owners and gave it either to freed people or to people who had helped out the North, who had fought for the Union.
Okay.
Not for long, though. Eventually, a lot of the land ended up being given back to the original plantation owners, but that's a whole...
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you for explaining that for me, because I was so confused. I was like, wait a second. So are we assuming that... Because I had it in my head that she was a spy for the South, and so she was gifted this land during the Civil War. But then I was like, but then why is she living in the South? Or was she given it afterwards and she relocated to the South? But that doesn't make any sense because the South lost the Civil War. So I was so confused.
I think we're supposed to think of her as a Civil War hero.
Oh God.
It's not, like a lot of things in this story, it's not explained super well outright. You have to read a lot of subtext.
Gotcha. So the second book that we find is one that doesn't have a title, but it does feature a chapter on the quote-unquote long cold night on Black Rock. We learn that Jeb Thornton, who lived from, I'm just giving this for some context, he lived from 1842 to 1887. He had a factory built on this island.
That seems very short.
Yeah, I guess so. He's, 40-something? 43? 44?
I have the family tree says 1839 to 1901.
Weird. Where did I get those dates from?
Maybe that's when he wrote the
Is
diary?
it a diary?
Or whatever it's his.
Maybe that was when.
Or whatever.
Maybe that was when the factory was in existence on the island.
Oh, probably.
Maybe that's what it was.
Sounds...
Anyway, so Jeb Thornton had a factory built on this island. But apparently, when it was hard to travel back to the mainland, and I'm going to say the quote-unquote workers, because they weren't workers, but we'll get there, were granted permission, quote-unquote granted permission, to stay overnight in the factory. Then there's this paragraph that's been blacked out by someone, and all that's left is a sentence that says, "None survived." We don't learn exactly what happened yet, but we do learn that Jeb built a housing unit for inclement weather afterwards, after this incident, and immediately restaffed the factory. So, apparently his wife, Sarah Wakeman Thornton, was very upset by these events, retired to her room afterwards, and refused to leave until her death just a few years later. And apparently she had written a note, this is just rumor, like a Thornton family legend, that said, "We have sown the black seeds of death, and forevermore will harvest only blood." Oh.
Are we supposed to feel
my
sorry
God.
for
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That's a great question, Corey. Are we? But I bring that up because apparently this dichotomy has existed within the Thornton family to this day, where there are family members who like either have like a dogged determination and like loyalty to the family company, or have this queasiness with their ill-gotten wealth.
At this point, we can call Addison. When we talk to her, she says that they visited Black Rock Island to search for ghosts and to blow off steam before the wedding. They were doing a scavenger hunt, actually, around the property of Black Rock Island, and were making recordings like they were on a ghost hunting show, which is kind of cute. But then things got really strange. She says that there is a locked door upstairs that Jessalyn was absolutely desperate to get into. And the whole night she seemed to be looking for something toward the end of the night. And then at one point, Jessalyn just disappeared. Addison heard her scream and couldn't find her, and she waited for hours until she finally returned. But then when she did come back, she wouldn't tell Addison what happened. Like, she was just kind of stoic and silent and was like, get away from me, I don't want to talk about it. But then she says they ended up going to sleep, and she was laying there and couldn't really fall asleep, but then started feeling fuzzy, and then she looked over and noticed that Jessalyn was gone again, and then she wanted to get up and look for her, but she was too scared.
I think it's a little bit different. She doesn't really say why, but she actually says, what she says is she couldn't move. And I'm wondering if this is not more physical than it was, being frightened. Like, it kind of seemed to me like she was trying to describe the feeling of being pinned down by something and, like, being unable to move because of that. But
okay, that tracks. That sounds familiar now. Thank you. She also tells us that she heard a strange voice that she thinks was Charlotte singing, and the next thing she remembers, it was the morning, and she was alone, and Jessalyn was gone.
Can we talk about how traumatic this would be? Like, Corey, if I went off to, like, an island with you to do spooky ghost hunting, investigating things, and then you just, like, disappeared and, like, never showed up again, I wouldn't
do that, first of all.
Sure. But I would be changed forever. Even if eventually you came back and, like, everything was fine and cool and dandy, it would be so scarring. Poor Addison is all I have to say.
Addison deserved better in all this, and we'll talk about
is a shitty friend.
I think Jessalyn.
Ding.
Yeah,
for sure.
Think she could have handled this better.
So if we keep exploring the house, so this is where I was going to talk about this back room on the first floor. So after we call Jessalyn, we can keep looking around, and back in that room, it's just the most terrifying room ever. There are things hanging from the ceiling, like equipment and chains and, like, scraps of fabric, which, why? Like, why is there just crap hanging from the ceiling? I don't know. There's also a cotton gin in here. And there are these doors on the back of the wall from, apparently, the barn that had originally housed the cotton processing equipment. And there's a plaque on this door that says, "Many a worker lost their fingers in the processing room." So,
what?
I'm sorry. Why have we hung these on the wall in here? Why have we taken these from the barn that they were on, where many a worker lost their fingers, and put it here and put a plaque on it that says that?
Right.
What the fuck? So troubling. But anyway, we can't open those doors yet. Eventually we will be able to. We can try to open them, but a scythe will fall down and decapitate us if we try too hard. Yeah. If we keep exploring upstairs, we'll find more paintings of Thorntons on the wall. We'll find some sleeping bags from where it looks like Jessalyn and Addison were sleeping. And of course, we find the locked door that Addison was talking about earlier. On the grounds, we find a list from the scavenger hunt, which helps us to understand kind of more of Jessalyn and Addison's movements that night. There are some things that are crossed off that can kind of tell us where they have been. And we can also explore the Thornton family cemetery. I mean, just like, yikes. That's all I have to say about the Thornton family cemetery. Like, big yikes. Immediately upon walking in, we are shouted at by a man who I can only describe as looking like a main character from the TV show Supernatural. He's wearing...
You're right.
He's wearing, like, this fur-lined coat. He has a grumpy southern accent. He's, like, gruff, wearing, like, these big boots and stuff. He's, like, so Supernatural character that it's not even funny.
Love it.
He confronts us and he says, "You're not Savannah." And so we learn that this is Wade. This is the same person that the ferryman has warned us about. So that's good to know. But he explains that, or we explain that we're here on behalf of Savannah because apparently Savannah is scared of the ghosts, which is like, okay, you're a ghost hunter again. But Wade says, "Oh, no, that was just an excuse. The real reason why Savannah isn't here is because she's scared of seeing me." He's pretty tight-lipped about their relationship, but it's pretty clear that they have been romantically involved in the past. He does tell us that there's a package that has been sent for us up in the house. He is also really into ghost hunting. That is like Wade's thing. So he also says a lot of spooky stuff to us about ghosts, and we can listen to like recordings of quote-unquote ghostly sounds he has found while ghost hunting if we go up and talk to him. But some of the most notable non-ghosty things he tells us is that he calls Colton a shifty little punk, and says something is crooked about his and Jesselyn's relationship. Interesting. More interesting information for us to collate in our brains. He also doesn't think it's fair that Clara, his cousin, runs the company, but he absolutely would not want to run the company himself. He does say that the only reason he is here is because Jesselyn is missing, and of course he cares about Jesselyn, but he refuses to step foot in the house. So throughout the graveyard, obviously there are a bunch of headstones, and whenever we approach one, Wade will tell us about who is buried there. And there is just so much drama surrounding all of the Thornton family members that I really don't have time to cover it all. But I think some of the most notable things that Wade tells us is that Clara doesn't know who her father is. Apparently, her mother would never say and took that secret to her deathbed, or to her grave, I should say. She didn't take it to her deathbed. She died. She never told anybody. We also learned that there's a headstone for someone named Harper, who's also Wade's cousin. But Harper's not dead. She ran away, maybe. I find this very questionable. She quote-unquote ran away and was gone so long that they thought she had died. And when she came back...
Where was the search party for Harper?
I have so much to say about Harper. So much to say about Harper. When she came back, she never told anybody where she was, and her grandfather was so mad about this, he left the headstone there to remind her of what she put them through. That's your daughter was missing! Your daughter was gone! Even if she ran away! Shh!
Grandfather,
oh, sorry, yes. Your granddaughter was missing! Like, even if she had run away... I'm sorry, I'm not to get too much into Harper because I have a lot to say about Harper, as I said. But even if someone has run away, they're not telling you where they were. They're not telling you why they ran away. They could have been in serious danger. They could have gone through some serious crap out there, and you're like, what you put us through? Right. What you put us through?
Right.
I just can't. These Thorntons, man, are... pieces of shit.
Right.
Anyway, so we can also find, so there's a painting upstairs that if we uncover a little smudge spot on, we see some hidden gravestones. One that says 54 souls. So we can find these in the graveyard. We can ask Wade about these, and he says that in their first factory, they never had sleeping arrangements for the quote-unquote workers. And that one winter, there was a harsh cold snap, so the workers built large fires inside that created fumes, and then none of them ever woke up. So here we're getting what really happened from that chapter that we read earlier in the book, or in the book that we found in the living room. We learn that all of the people who were inside of this factory built fires because they didn't have proper sleeping arrangements where they could stay warm. And as a result of that, they, I suppose, all got carbon monoxide poisoning and never woke up from their sleep. There's so much to say about that I feel like we gotta save it, that I can't even get into it now. We also learned that Wade went to prison. So this is probably why the ferryman had warned us about Wade, because he has a little bit of a history with the law. He says the reason why he went to prison was because he heard that the Thornton processing plant in town was, I'm going to use so many quote unquotes in this episode, it should be like a freaking tagline, because I have issues and so many questions about the things that everybody says in this game. But so he says he heard that the processing plant in town was quote unquote up to its old tricks by hiring people who couldn't afford to quit, treating them poorly, and locking them into the factory to meet quotas. So Wade went to the factory at night and then clearly saw that all of the exits had been padlocked, confirming that this is the case, this is what's happening. And he was so upset and angry that he broke into the factory and broke one of their big machines. And Clara had him arrested because Clara is the one who is in charge of the company at this time, the one responsible for this, and one would assume knowledge of this and maybe even directed someone to do this.
Yep, exactly, yep.
There's literally so many things to say that it's like halting in my voice because I don't know what to say first about this. So we'll talk about it later.
That's okay. So after we talk to Wade, we go back to Thornton Hall, and he mentions that Savannah had sent us a package, so we go upstairs, we find the package. Inside the box, there is an EMF detector for hunting ghosts, and then also a book that she's written about Thornton Hall. We flip through the book really quickly, and we see that it has stories from people who claim to have seen the ghost of Charlotte. Some were like teenagers right after like Charlotte died, and they came just because they heard ghost stories about her in town and they wanted to try to see her. Other people were like they'd actually known her in real life and then saw her after she died, just a few different ghost sighting accounts. And then after we read the book, we put it down, we turn, look down the hall, and we see our very first Charlotte sighting. This is a fully formed apparition walking towards us. She's wearing a 19th century red ball gown with a black masquerade mask, and as she gets closer to us, she kind of slowly disappears and then dissipates. She never actually gets to us. We just see her walking. I want to say we also hear music as well. Yeah, it's just all very spooky. So we go downstairs. We go downstairs and we can tell Clara what we saw, and she is really not open to discussing this strange thing that she thinks that we think we saw. But she does tell us that locked room that's upstairs is Charlotte's old bedroom. Apparently the day of Charlotte's funeral, the door locked itself tight, and no one has ever been able to open it since then.
Spooky!
She also tells us, we ask her about Wade and whether he really went to prison, if she really sent him there, and she says that she meant well by pressing charges against Wade.
I can't.
Whatever.
This woman.
She says that she had intended to drop the charges. Actually, I think I wrote this down.
Was bullshit?
Yeah,
because it smacks of bullshit.
She says that she meant to drop the charges, that she thought that he was only going to get community service, but she couldn't drop the charges, quote unquote, once the ball got rolling.
Mm-hmm.
So she just got distracted and forgot, or she thought that she could use her family's influence to like get the judge or the police to just get him community service or let him off easy. I don't know what that's supposed to imply.
Well, and also just the thought that like, oh, I'm going to press charges now, but I'm going to drop them later is like, okay, thanks for wasting all this taxpayer money.
Right. To
Rich
what?
bitch. Sorry.
Teach him a
like the presumption. Wow. No, what she says is that he got in front of a judge that wanted to make an example. And it's like,
an example.
Well, but also, if you were going to drop the charges, like, that probably would have happened before he saw a judge. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So, that doesn't really ring true to me, but, whatever.
But yeah, he got in front of the judge, gets sentenced to prison for 1 year, and she says that she thinks that maybe he took Jessalyn in order to get back at her for doing this to him. But she doesn't want to go there mentally. Like,
the audacity!
I think that he would do that.
The audacity of this bitch, Corey!
I know.
I'm sorry, I can't move forward without talking about this. So we confront her for her awful wrongdoing, basically. I mean, we don't even discuss the fact that she had locked workers into a factory overnight, to meet quotas or whatever. But we're like, hey, you sent your family member to jail because they were upset at something you had done.
Right.
And she was like, oh, but, maybe Wade is responsible for taking Jessalyn. This screams narcissistic personality disorder.
Oh, yeah.
I just, I cannot, oh no, but really I'm the victim because my daughter is missing. I can't. Right. I can't.
It's a lot. It's a lot to take in. Absolutely. We do also ask Clara about Charlotte, and she tells us that Charlotte was her cousin. Charlotte actually died here when she was 21 years old. Apparently, Clara's mother was of the mindset that Thorntons who died only had a short time to make their peace, and if they weren't able to, they would slip into the cracks of the world and join the others, the quote-unquote hungry shadows, from an accident that happened on the island. And so they're going to haunt this island forever, right? And then we go back out into the hallway and hear some creepy singing.
Yeah. Yeah. So Nancy says this creepy singing sounds like it's coming from upstairs. So if we go upstairs, we can find a note that's been left for Nancy that says, Charlotte has requested a meeting, and asks us to wear a blindfold and recite a rhyme with a dreadful meter where the meter is at its peak. So basically we have to go to the spot in the house where the EMF reading is at its highest. Turns out it's right in front of the doors of the creepy equipment room with the plaque commemorating the loss of limbs.
Fingers.
Yes. So, I mean, go figure, right? Who would know? Who could guess that this was the most haunted spot in the house? So we do that, put on a blindfold, and we recite the poem that Wade told us earlier, which is the poem that kids would recite when they came to the island to try to see the ghost of Charlotte. And that is, fire so red, night so black, dear sweet Charlotte, please come back. So we have some choices when we go.
It's chilling.
It is very chilling. But we have different choices when we go and stand there. We have a couple other things we can say, and I just want to say the choices because they are hilarious, like prime comedy. Yeah. The first one is, roses are red, ghosts aren't real, come on Thorntons, what's your deal? And then the second one is, the fire is warm, the night is cold, I can't see through this blindfold. So funny.
Excellent.
But anyway, once we recite the correct rhyme, we hear the door in front of us open, and someone starts to pull us through this doorway. They talk to us in like a raspy southern voice, and eventually, once we've reached this destination, wherever they've taken us, they let us take off the blindfold. And we meet, for the first time, my favorite character in this game, Harper Thornton.
Possibly
honestly,
one of the best characters
so
in the
great.
series.
So great.
She might be in the top 10 overall.
Yeah. And we also, if we look around, and from what Harper tells us, we can gather that we are in the cellar. We are underneath Thornton House.
Which, again, with the layout, we don't go downstairs. It's just a long dirt hallway.
It's a great point.
There's no stairs. It's not even a particularly inclined hallway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't. Sorry. Anyway.
No, that's a great point. So Harper tells us that she is hiding under the house because she doesn't want the family to find her. But it's really important to kind of say that Harper is definitely odd. She tends to ramble about things that aren't obviously related. She tells us that she is a quote-unquote sociopath with delusions of grandeur and a history of erratic behavior and violent tendencies. And from the way that she speaks about her family and just her mannerisms and overall demeanor, it doesn't sound untrue. There's definitely a vibe given off that we're supposed to believe that Harper is crazy, and she definitely leans into this perception of herself.
Well, I think she has an excellent sense of
Definitely.
humor, because I think that a lot of things she says about herself is just kind of ragging on her family members for how poorly they've treated her. Like, yeah, I might be a sociopath with delusions of grandeur, but they made me this way. This is, this is like...
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely.
I'm this spooky, scary Harper. Look at me. I'm so harmful, just chilling in the basement by myself. Cellar, whatever.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to, as someone, if you're being vilified by, your entire family... The only way, not the only way, but a great way to reclaim that is yeah, great, I'm the villain. Let's be the fucking villain.
That's me.
You know what I mean? Oh, and it just
you want a villain?
Makes me love Harper so much, so much. Anyway.
Yes.
So she also tells us that her family resents her, and the neighborhood kids used to call her Witch Lady, which perfection.
Yeah,
she also tells us that we better not tell anyone she's down here, or she knows she'll just do something rotten. I love it. She does give us a note that contains a puzzle to be able to find her again, and then kicks us out of the cellar. So we're unable to go back until we solve this and figure out how to get back down there. But once we are, which it does involve some puzzling, we can open the door and explore under the house. There are a bunch of luckily well-lit tunnels. And Corey, this is what I was going to say is the least creepy part of the house. Underneath the house.
Oh,
the basement,
yeah.
And specifically the tunnels in the basement are not creepy at all. They're actually quite well kept. They're not dirty. There's no really cobwebs or anything. They're well lit. Everything seems to work down here.
That's an excellent point.
I don't know, maybe it's just because we're in a cellar and so we're kind of expecting a certain level of cellarness. But it seems kind of like a normal room to me, much more normal than the haunted AF locations upstairs. So
I like to call Bess from in the hallway because I don't feel like anything's going to sneak up on me there. Upstairs, Charlotte's going to sneak up on me as soon as I'm done with that call, and I know it.
And isn't it interesting that the least haunted space in this house is the space where Harper resides? I want to talk about this later.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, okay, so...
Although we do see a little bit of I wouldn't call it a haunting, but we see something in the basement. When you go down there and all of a sudden it's people walking around there and then they're gone.
Oh, that's what that is. I never understood that sequence, but okay, interesting. Yeah, anyway, so down in the tunnels, we can find a few things. Most importantly, Jesselyn's backpack we find.
Yes.
Inside Jesselyn's backpack, we find a Cocoa Kringle bar, which Nancy promptly eats. Way to go, Nancy. Priorities.
Stealing the missing girl's chocolate.
We also find some notes about the wedding that seem to have been written by Jesslyn and then annotated by Colton. So almost as if she has passed off these notes to Colton and he has returned them with his own comments. And a Thornton family tree. The most informative document that we'll find throughout this entire game.
Yes,
that we will
a lot of context.
Yes, be able to frequently reference to be like, wait, who was that? And when was this? And how are these people related? Also, when exploring, we find, obviously, Harper again. Harper is huddling next to the furnace down here, and we can talk to her more and learn some very disturbing things, including that her family had her committed when she was young, and now she seems to be unhoused. She doesn't seem to have a place to live. It's also worth noting, too, that if we ask Clara about this later, she denies this, that Harper was committed, and says that Harper just went to boarding school. But my question is, how would Clara know this? Because Clara wasn't the one who sent her off. It was, Harper's parents, right? Presumably, or Harper's grandparents, maybe. So Clara wouldn't have known.
It's not super clear because Harper would have been, how much younger was she than Charlotte?
A few years, but not many.
She was 3 years younger, so she would have been 18
when she died.
When Charlotte died. So, and she, quote unquote, went crazy after Charlotte died. Or that's when, most of her trouble started. So you don't start boarding school at 18. I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I have to mention the quote because it's so funny what Harper says about this when Nancy goes oh, Clara says you didn't go to an asylum, it was a boarding school, and she's like, oh, a boarding school, huh? Next she's gonna say that Wade spent a year at Camp Mandatory earning merit badges.
Harper is
so
hilarious.
Love Harper.
She's so funny. She's almost the only character worth talking to in this whole game.
Right. Wade's not bad, but Harper is obviously the best. He's not great.
I don't love Wade, but
at least he doesn't have a black heart like Claire
True.
does.
At least he's a human being of feeling, not like an automaton.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, but so my thought is also Harper was supposed to have run away, right? From the Tombstone story, right? She ran away.
Right.
So when was that? And I'm just interested about the timeline of Harper. That. But anyway.
Yeah.
After leaving the cellar, we find that Jesslyn's phone has finally charged enough to where we can look at it. This takes the longest time in the game. And, always, going back to the phone to see, is it charged yet? Has it charged yet? Has it charged yet? Finally, after getting back into the cellar, we're able to look at it. We do have to solve a puzzle, the epitaph hunt, to be able to get the password to open this phone. But once we do, we can find all of the voice recordings that Jesslyn and Addison made that night. They are very interesting to listen to. They are super spooky. And we learned that they looked for the ruins where Charlotte died, and they also must have gotten into the crypt in the graveyard at some point. We can also hear the period where Jesslyn disappeared and then came back. And it's just a very interesting exchange because when she returns, you can just tell how terrified Addison is of her having been missing, and she's pleading with Jesslyn to tell her what's happened, where she's been, what is going on. And Jesslyn only responds with silence and a very sharp "leave me alone now," which is what a way to speak to your friend. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Very harsh, yeah.
So there was also a key in Jesslyn's backpack, and we can go upstairs and try that on Charlotte's door. But as soon as we turn down that hallway, we hear very spooky singing, and we see that the door to Charlotte's room, which has always been shut and locked, is suddenly standing open. But then as the singing kind of goes on and progressive, suddenly the door slams shut. and everything just kind of then goes back to normal. And then when we go up to try the door is still locked, which is like, we just saw the door standing open. How is this door locked now? What did we see? But we can use the key on the door, and it spins like it fits in the lock, but it must be broken because it won't open.
So at this point, we really can't progress in the game until we've told someone that we found Harper down in the basement. So we go and you can either tell Clara or Wade, but eventually, like, both of them will go check. And when we get down there, Harper's nowhere to be found. And Clara kind of insinuates that we made this up, that we imagined it, or we were lying for some reason. She's like, quit lying to me, leave me alone. I'm a grieving mother, or some weird stuff. But eventually we do go back upstairs. We hear the singing again. We find another note has been left for us upstairs. This helps us get into a secret tunnel in the basement. So if you go through the cellar, you solve a puzzle and it opens up like a secret passageway in a basement that leads to underneath the front porch of the house. Once we get up there, we can overhear Colton is actually on the phone talking to someone named Lexi. Very interesting little conversation. He's like, we can talk once this is all over. It's just kind of a vague conversation. But also down in this little area underneath the porch, we find Jesselyn's digital camera. We flip through the pictures and we see some images of some previously unreachable locations. So this kind of like unlocks them in the game for us, and we can go explore those spots. And then we also find she's taken a picture of a spot underneath the porch that we can zoom in on it, and we have a little shovel and we can dig it up, and we find a box that is locked and it's got this like fancy seal on it, but we can't open it just yet. And this is actually where Nancy starts to feeling a little bit woozy, and she's like, oh man, maybe I just need to go lie down. And that kind of triggers the end of the first evening. And then when we wake up, it's like the next night. It's the start of the next evening. We're on the phone with Bess, and Ned is actually a phone character in this one as well. We're talking to them, and she's like, oh wait guys, I have to go. Bye, I see something. So we hang up with them, and then there is another note left for us on that little table upstairs in the hallway where we keep finding these notes.
So after, having been under the porch and overhearing this conversation, when we go to leave the house, we hear Colton talking to Lexi again. This is where he says, I know you still care about me, and I want to see you when this is all over, and all kinds of stuff. So we're like, okay, Colton has a thing with this Lexi person. So when we confront Colton about this, he straight up tells us that he is in love with Lexi, and his engagement to Jesselyn was based on a lie, and that it's a lie that their whole family was in on. What?
Yikes.
Oh my god.
Okay. This is getting interesting now.
Very interesting. So apparently Lexi had broken up with him out of the blue a while ago, and as soon as that happened, this is kind of when Clara started pushing him and Jesselyn together. But now he knows that actually his parents pushed Lexi to break up with him, and so basically him and Jesselyn's relationship was just like all this orchestrated situation by his parents and Clara. Wild.
Yeah.
He does tell us he doesn't have anything to do with Jesselyn being missing, but it's very interesting because, kind of regardless, he would stand to benefit quite a bit if the wedding was called off. He also does imply that Jesselyn must have known about this too. Like, it couldn't have just been Clara. Like, Jesselyn had to have been in on this plan as well. And one could also see how he might harbor some serious resentment and anger towards Jesselyn if that were the case. So he says he's innocent, but is he? Who knows?
They all say they're
Who
innocent,
knows?
don't they?
So, yes, so also on the digital camera, we had some pictures, and there was a picture of the ruins where apparently Charlotte died. So now we can go find those. And when we get there, we see that it's like this old rundown house, which I find this very interesting and kind of confusing. It's like this.
Why is there a second house on the
Yes, why is
property?
there a second house? And it's also a house that like doesn't look anything like the style of the
No.
main house. So it's almost like it's not like it's an outbuilding or something like that, or it's like a fully like suburban almost like house. I mean, it's run down and clearly it's been burnt to a crisp, but it is very strange. When we go inside this house, we see Charlotte again. She's again in that creepy red dress. She's going down the spiral staircase that's in the center of this house that has collapsed, but she is moving down them. And there's also some more creepy singing. As soon as she disappears in the house, we can find an old film reel and finally the key to the crypt, which I've been trying to get into for so long at this point.
Right.
If we go straight to the crypt, we are greeted by Harper popping out of a grate in the ground of the crypt. Quite the entrance. So terrifying. First, it's like, oh my god.
You expect nothing less of Harper.
Oh my god, zombie! No, it's just Harper trying to spook us.
Yeah. She's not happy with us for telling
Not
on
at
her.
all. She's super annoyed, and she really won't even let us explore the crypt while she's there. So basically, we have no other choice but to leave and go do something else. But since we have this film reel, we can watch that now. And we see footage of Charlotte's birthday party. Oof. It's like happy footage of like a cake and presents and everything, but it's also interspersed with what I can only call like creepy zoomed in footage of the ruined wall of the house. So it's very confusing. Because it's like, how was this filmed? What are we watching? Because it's very clearly from back when Charlotte died, but also somehow present day. Mm-hmm. Very strange. As we watch this, I didn't make a note of this, but Clara actually walks in and is so upset by what we're watching and tells us to turn it off. And so yikes.
Yeah.
So clearly the footage was trying to show us something about this ruined wall. So if we go back to the ruins and look at that house again, we get another Charlotte sighting. But this time we see her and there is like ash and smoke in the air, and she walks towards us, but she's like almost moving in a very like odd contorted way that looks kind of painful. Yeah. And then she burns up and disappears. It's the most disturbing Charlotte sighting, I think, throughout the whole game. Yeah.
So we get it in little bitty pieces, but essentially the story is that on her 21st birthday, something happened right before the party was going to start. The building that Charlotte was in caught fire, and she died in the fire, which is this ruins.
Right. Yes. After we see this vision of Charlotte, Nancy passes out. Rich is like, yeah, I'd probably pass out too. From that, this time though, she wakes up exactly where she passed out. She's not in some other random location. She hasn't been moved. She just wakes up where she fell on the ground, still in the ruined house. And if we walk back up to that back wall that the footage was kind of highlighting, we see a clue to a puzzle in the crypt. It's just like something about, I think it's the flower one or something. It tells us,
There's a few different puzzles in the crypt, and it's a tanagram puzzle. You have to put them together, and then you can open the coffins.
Right.
Because this isn't creepy enough, we have to open the coffins.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so, in the crypt, when we do that, we're able to get some items that help us get into Charlotte's bedroom, also along with an old locket. At this point, we can also take a flower from inside the crypt and leave it at the statue in the graveyard, which is what the last note that we got instructed us to do. And when we go back into the house, there has been another note left for us. It's at this point, it's pretty obvious that Harper is the one that's doing this, that's writing these notes and leaving them as a way to like communicate with us. So we're basically completing Harper's instructions.
Yeah. Okay, so this most recent note that Harper has left us, it instructs us to go into the tunnels and find out who has been sneaking around in the house. So we go down into the tunnels, we go down into the cellar, and we're able to open up another tunnel in there. And this actually takes us to like a spiral staircase that leads us behind the wall that's directly outside of the hallway, that looks into the hallway that's directly outside of Charlotte's room. And looking through the wall, we can see that Wade is jiggling the door handle on Charlotte's room. He's like trying to use a key or something. And he's like, come on, Charlotte, darling, you got to help me out with this. But then he like hears something, he gets spooked and he runs away. We hear something, he drops something metal on the ground. So once he's gone, we can go and pick it up. It is indeed a key. And then we now can like put these parts together and we're able to get the door lock working. There's another puzzle that we have to do, but now finally we can open the door to Charlotte's bedroom and we can go in. This room is, you would think it's a lot creepier than it is. It's still in surprisingly good shape considering how nasty and gross and dilapidated the rest of the house is. But, you know, nobody's been in here since, when did she die? In like
1989, I think.
Yeah, 89. Yes, absolutely right.
I remember because that's when my sister was born.
Oh, okay.
So I always think that whenever I see that year. I'm like, oh.
Oh, gotcha. So yes, she's been locked up since 89, so it's not as, I guess, gross as the rest of the house. A lot of the furniture is just covered with sheets. There is a really large bed, obviously like a canopy bed on the left. There's a big fireplace in front of us. To the left of the bed is Charlotte's desk, and then there's some more, like there's a little table and some paintings on the right side of the room. We go over to the desk and we find Charlotte's journal. We can only read one page of the journal, unfortunately, but she says that she is worried about someone who seems close to slipping off the edge and doing something crazy. She's also trying to find a way to keep herself safe, and she says that her room has been locked down and she's working on getting her papers somewhere safe as well. Very, very interesting, intriguing entry in the diary there, but there's also a few other things in the room. There's a puzzle to do with the fireplace. There's some clocks in the fireplace, and then there's also a cryptic note about the tunnels not being safe, and to make the clock strike 12 if you're not feeling safe. So I don't think we can do this just yet.
No, I mean, I don't think I did. I think because that's when we have to go to sleep.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. So Nancy starts getting woozy again, and we decide to go to bed.
Hey, Regular Drews! Just jumping in here to say that this episode is getting really long.
Just a little bit. That's okay.
Yeah, so we are going to go ahead and just cut it off here, and we are going to post part 2. It's actually already posted for you to go listen to right now.
Yep, so go join us over on part 2.